Hey guys, what's up? So today I'm gonna do another video on Esper Modern Deck, and today's video is gonna primarily focus on side decking, since I've been asked a few times how to side deck and what to put in, what to take out, stuff like that. And side decking is a skill that is very difficult to master unless you have a lot of practice or you have a lot of playtime or um, yeah, it's honestly just a lot of practice and a lot of like knowing what your matchup is and knowing what your opponent's deck can do and knowing what your own weakness is and trying to cover that up with your side deck. And I found that main deck stuff is usually pretty non-negotiable. Like there's a lot of like optimal builds for your main deck, and you can kind of just copy and paste a list you see online or something like that, and the main deck will just kind of work itself, and you kind of just pilot it pretty easily. But when it comes to game 2 and 3, that's where it kind of divides the good players from the bad players. And so side decking is extraordinarily, um, I would say it's more difficult than playing, or I guess it's different because it's deck building in the middle of a match. So you deck build. Obviously, you build your deck before the playing the game, and then you have to kind of change your deck up, build it during the match, and knowing what to take in and out. And that's just another dynamic on its own. And while I'm not the best at side decking, definitely I think I could definitely use a lot more practice and more testing. But I have experience in side decking in other games, primarily Yu-Gi-Oh, and that's it's a whole different game, of course. But some of the aspects do kind of share. You basically, like I mentioned, you have to be able to cover the weakness of your deck, or if there's something your deck does that's really strong against that particular matchup, maybe you add more cards to make your matchup even stronger or better. Or if your opponent's doing something that's gonna really hinder your strategy, like let's say you're playing a graveyard deck and your opponent's gonna side in some graveyard hate, you're gonna have to counter side that. So um, I'll kind of get into that in a second here, but basically just kind of explain my setup here. I took out my lands, I put them in a different pile. I normally don't put in lands and take out lands. I just leave it as is. In this deck, I'm playing 24 lands, which is on a little bit of the lower end for control decks. Most control decks play 25, 26 lands. Um, I hate flooding out, but I also playing a lot of cantrips and draw cards, so that's why I'm hopefully able to make up that deficiency in lands. But that's just me. If you're playing more lands, good for you. I think for me, I just hate drawing lands after like a couple of turns. But being in control deck, anyways, so I'm gonna put that to the side. So we're gonna see is 36 cards in the main here, and then my 15 side cards here, and I'm just gonna go over um, some general rules of siding, and I'm gonna look on MTG Goldfish or one of the other website and just pull up some top decks that are currently performing right now in the meta, and then just kind of talk about that and what I would do if I were facing against them, and then kind of show you what I would put in and take out. And not everything is the correct play. Like it's just kind of like trial by fire, honestly, when building your deck and building your side deck. You really don't know what to side in, what's good and what's not. And but yeah, so let's talk about what I mentioned earlier about counter siding and siding. So there are kind of like two different methods you can go with your side deck. So first method is to side in cards, just regular siding cards that would be good against your opponent's deck. So for example, right here, I just have an example of Sanctifier Invicт. So I would play her if I'm playing against a red or a black deck that uses their graveyard a lot, or really has no way of interacting with her to remove her. So she'd be a good side card, good hindrance against them. So that's just your basic side decking. Um, Playing cards that are strong against your opponent's strategy. And the second thing is counter siding. So counter siding is basically to cover um, well, I guess I guess now that I'm thinking about it, I guess countersign is to cover your own weakness, but it's also, you can also divide that into two different trains of thought. One is to cover your own weakness, and then two is to counterside against your opponent's side cards. If you know what that means. So if they know your strategy, um, and they're gonna side in cards that are strong against your deck, you may want to side in cards that are strong against their side cards, or take out cards from your deck that are gonna be weak to their side cards. So that's the other strategy there. So one, you're trying to push your advantage with your side cards. Two, you're gonna cover maybe some deficiency in your side deck, or in your main deck in general. And then three is to basically try to do kind of like a reverse logic sort of deal when it comes to dealing with your opponent's side cards. So yeah. So let me just go ahead and explain to you my side deck first, and then my thought process on the cards I selected for my side deck. Now this is just all subjective. It's side deck is just like I mentioned. It's one of those things you kind of have just to play a lot, and then realize what your deck sucks at, and realize what cards maybe you should put in instead, and go from there. For me, I play against a lot of graveyard decks in my meta. Whether it was from MH2 or before, a lot of decks I play, they're always going to rely on the graveyard. Graveyard strategies are just very, very popular in my area, and they've proven themselves online. Like with Loris and Living N, and Esper Reanimator, stuff like that. Or even if they're not a graveyard strategy, they use their graveyard as a way to like reduce costs or get additional advantage. Like say Murktide, for example, you have more cards in the graveyard, you can use it to make Murktide cheaper, or you can activate Delirium off of Dragon Rage Chandler, or Unholy Heat, for example. So there's a couple. It's just graveyard in general are very just another way of getting resources, and I tend to like to try to deny my opponent of their graveyard resources, because then that way it allows me to fight them one for one when they're trying to cast something from their hand. I have a counter spell or something like that. I can counter it and not have to worry about them trying to use their graveyard to kind of make their cards cheaper, or to make their cards free, or to reoccur their cards from the graveyard. That's just kind of my way of thinking, and that for the most part has worked okay for me. Which is why instead of playing just a blue-white control deck, I play an Esper deck, because I want to focus on denying them their graveyard, and focus on trying to establish board, and establish my threats on the board, namely my planeswalkers and maybe one or two snapcasters or something like that, while trying to combat their hand with counter spells and stuff like that. So that's the overall theme and strategy of my deck, and why I build it the way I build it. And obviously, it's not like a top tier deck or anything. I can obviously, um, play something that's more proven. Like just your regular blue white control with maybe the Chalice of the Void. That's been the proven strategy. But I find that kind of boring. I find it kind of like and I just don't like sitting on a floodgate, I guess, and it gets kind of boring there. So I mean, control in general is already kind of a boring deck to play, because it's the same strategy. You're not really weak to anything per se. There's a few decks that obviously are gonna struggle against, but for the most part, control is just that. It's you're not letting your opponent play the game, and you're trying to establish your own board to kind of slowly drain your opponents of resource, and get ahead. You don't really have any flashy combos. You don't really got any, cool interaction as much. Flashy plays, value. You're basically a value deck that is forcing your opponent to lose a lot of cards while trying to combat yours. So, um, enough of my rambling on deck idea there. Let's go ahead and get into my side deck, and I'll show you. And if you watch my deck profile, it's the same thing, but I want to go into more depth in talking about the cards I've selected for my side deck. So first off, let's go ahead and talk about Sanctifier Invicт, or Onvict, I guess, however you pronounce it. So I play her namely because red is always going to be a prominent color in your meta. Um, she is a little hard to cast. I mean, at least in Esper, because she's double white, and if you're keeping a 2 to 3 land hand and you see her in your opening hand, good. There's a good chance you might not always be able to cast her. So she's a little risky in that sense. But I found that she applies a lot of pressure in terms of being able to be used as a blocker, being able to be used as an attacker, and to deny my opponent of their resources in their graveyard. So for 2 mana, 2/2, I think she does the job. Most of the time, my opponents can't get rid of her. If they're playing, red or black, it's just very difficult to interact with her, and I think that's why I play her. And um, yeah, I think she's just a great card in general. Just she's probably better in like a straight blue white control build, but even in my Esper deck, I still like just seeing her and just playing her and having her as a body, as an additional threat and a sort of a win con sometimes. So yeah, 2 Sanctifier there. Um, Next off is 2 Rest in Peace. I definitely think if you're playing any sort of control deck that involves white, you probably should be playing Rest in Peace, unless you're playing like uh, a Reanimator deck or something like that. But Rest in Peace is definitely um, a great card. It once you put it down, you really don't have to worry about the graveyard anymore. You can just kind of proceed with your own game plan, and if your opponent's relying on their graveyard and they see you Rest in Peace, it's basically game over unless they can remove this. Now, obviously, they can always counterspell it if they're playing some sort of blue card or blue deck, or if they're playing white, they might be able to prismatic ending this or something like that. But for the most part, Rest in Peace is pretty hard to remove, and most of the time, people don't really want to spend too much time trying to remove it unless their entire deck revolves around graveyard. They're gonna try to remove it. It's definitely stronger than, say, Soul Guiding Lantern, stronger than Tormont's Grave, whatever, and then the other popular one, Relic of Progenesis, because it just sits there. You don't really you play it and you just don't have to think about it. The other cards, the other artifacts are just more, you know, you gotta tap and sack them, and your opponent can still respond to it and stuff like that. Once you play this, there's just no responding to it. You just set it and forget it, which is why I like Rest in Peace. I only play 2 because it does get a little cloggy. Like if you're opening up with multiple of these, or you see them later in the game, definitely gets cloggy. I think 2 is fine. You'll see it enough. Plus, you're playing other graveyard hate, so it's not the end of the world if you don't see this during in your opening hand. But you want to see it, you want to play it. You want to have one additional copy as for redundancy, but you don't want to put 3 or 4 in your deck, because then you're just gonna take up a lot of extra sideboarding space on top of opening up with too many of these. You're just gonna not have cards to play. So 2 is good for me here. Next off, I played Dovin's Veto. Now, there's other counter spells you can play. 3 main ones I can think of that might take a place of Dovin's Veto would be Force of Negation, Spell Pierce, Mystic Dispute. I think those were the 3 there. And I think that's really it. Yeah, those are the 3 that if you weren't playing Dovin's Veto, you should play those instead, because they are cheaper to play. They cost 1 blue mana for the most part, or in Forces Negations, it's free if you pitch your card. But the reason I play Force Negation, or sorry, Dovin's Veto, is for decks that are combo. So there are a few combo decks, in a few blue combo decks, and most of the time, if they're trying to combo off, Dovin's Veto is one way to stop it. Because if you play a regular counter spell, if they pack of negation you or something like that, you're donezo. It's basically game over. So this is a for sure way just to counter that particular spell that they're trying to use to combo off. And I think obviously I'm already playing other counter spells. I'm playing regular counter spells. I'm playing Archmage Charm, and that sort of stuff. And if that doesn't work, Dovin's Veto is the other way to go. Is just to make sure that they just can't stop it. So that's why I like Dovin's Veto. I'm not really playing Dispute or Pierce, or I guess Force is the other one that's debatable. But I'm not playing Pierce or Dispute because while there are a lot of like Murktide decks and blue decks running around, I find that those cards are better in mirror controls. Um, like the Dispute and the Pierce, where the Omen's Veto can still be used in control mirror matchups and still can be used in other against other combo decks a little bit better than Dispute or Pierce. And plus, I guess I just don't like them late game. If you're drawing Pierce and Dispute late game, they're kind of dead because your opponent can at that time probably has enough mana to pay for them. But early in the game, obviously they're good. They're just one mana. They're technically better than Dovin's Veto in that sense. If you have one mana open, they're a little bit more. They're more of a tempo play, where Veto is more of just like a long game play, more of a force of guaranteed denial in that sense. And I guess Force of Negation can kind of be like that. Like if you try to counterspell something on your opponent's turn and they spell pierce it, and you have a force in hand, you can again respond to it for free. So yes, Force Negation can kind of serve the same purpose as Dovin's Veto, but Force requires a -1, I guess. So that's up to you. I prefer not pitching cards out of my hand and to minus myself. But you can also hard cast Force Negation, so it's not the worst. I guess I just prefer Dovin's Veto and have liked it since I've played it. So there's that. Now triple Aethergus. Once again, red's a very prominent color in my meta, or pretty much in the top 5 decks. Red is always going to be a prominent. Sorry, kind of caught my tongue there. A predominant color that you're going to be facing against. Same with green. Green's a pretty popular color too, but not as much as red. I like Aethergus for several reasons. Playing against red, obviously it can act as a counter spell, but primarily for me, I use this to remove Blood Moon because my deck is very weak to Blood Moon. If there's one card in red that I fear the most, it's Blood Moon. Everything else, Ragavan, is difficult, and Darcy's difficult. Expressive Alliteration is difficult to deal with. But Blood Moon will outright lose me the game if I don't have an answer to it. And Aethergus is an answer to when I have one island. I can just Aethergus the Blood Moon that's on the board away. Yes, you do have access to marches, and you have access to Teferi, and you have access to Prismatic Ending to try to remove Blood Moon. But Aethergus is instant speed, and it just requires 1 blue mana. Where the other ones required several mixture of mana in order to get rid of Blood Moon. And if you're playing against under Blood Moon, you're most likely going to have one island. You're not going to really have a plains to cast Prismatic Ending or March, and you're unlikely to have both plains and an island to cast a fairy to balance the Blood Moon. On top of that, Aethergus, you can do it at the end of your opponent's turn, and then have your mana open up on your turn to do whatever. So that's why I like the Aethergus. Aethergus also hits what I struggle with the most is any deck that plays Caverns of Souls minus Merfolks. Merfolks I don't really care as much, but stuff like Elementals and Titans, Titan decks, those are what Aethergus is going to be for. You're going to be hitting, Kahira. You're going to be hitting, what's his face, Titan, and for sure you're going to be hitting Omnath. So those are the cards that I'm going to be primarily using Aethergus against, especially when they have Cavern of Souls out. This deck loses Cavern of Souls. When you draw multiple counter spells, and each turn they're casting one creature with Cavern, and you just can't interact with that. That's where you're going to be behind on board. On top of that, our removals, it's good, but you're not always going to see that removal in order to remove them. And if they have a Teferi on board, you're kind of screwed too. So I like Aethergus for situations where they might have Cavern of Souls, or they might have a Summoner Veil of Summers. This card gets under that too, which is really nice. You know, Counterspell doesn't get under that. So if they cast a green spell, you just force them to spend all that mana to spin it on top of their deck or put it to the bottom of their deck. Their choice, but gets under both of those. Gets under Caverns and gets under Veil, which I really like Aethergust for, which is why I think it's important to play 3. At 2 at minimum, 3 at the most. I think 4 might be overkill, but I definitely love seeing this card against those particular matchups. And then Kaya's Guile. This is just a double down on my black removal suite, and obviously it's one of the best Orzhov color cards to play. All the modes are always relevant in most of your matchups, even against control. Making a 1/1 token or just healing or exiling your opponent's graveyard, always great. And the fact that it sacrifices is really good too. The sacrificing, you don't really think about it, but it does come up often, especially against cards that have regenerate or cannot be targeted or has indestructible. So you come across like Emrakul, or you can come across the troll, the 4-mana troll that can't be countered, has regenerate. I forgot what his name was. Or you can come across like the Trotsky, the squirrel guy, stuff like that. So Kaya's Guile is a great way to kind of somewhat counter side against them too, if you're suspecting that they're siding those type of cards in against you, especially as a control player. You're gonna expect them to play some green cards that can't be countered. Maybe like the Triceratop that can't be countered or can't be targeted by blue cards, stuff like that. So that's why I like Kaya's Guile against, and I still like Kaya's Guile to remove graveyard, especially if they're trying to cast something from the graveyard, or they're trying to cast Living Death or a Reanimator spell. Kaya's Guile will put to rest all of that that's shenanigans. What it doesn't put to rest is Murktide. So for Murktide, you have to suspect that your opponent has Murktide in hand. If they do, then you want to do this during their upkeep or something and just exile their entire graveyard. Or I guess you can let Murktide come down and then sacrifice the Murktide with the sacrificing ability. So either way, this card's great to deal with Murktide. It's great to deal with other stuff. Not so great to deal with small stuff like Ragavans, Darcy. It's a little bit harder. If it's their only card on the board, then yes, you can do that. But you're trading Temple because it's a 1/1 threat, and you're trading 3 mana to remove that 1/1 threat. That's where I'm a little iffy about sometimes. But it is what it is. Sometimes you have prismatic ending, cool. Sometimes you don't. But in general, I think Kaya's Guile is the reason why I would play black in a blue-white controlled style deck. Last off, I think here. Oh, not last off here. Here is another maybe. I've liked Kaya the Usurper. Has won me a few games where I ulted with her, or I just keep her on the board, and every time my opponent tries to dump something in the graveyard, I just remove it and keep upticking with her. So I like her at the 1 so far, and her -1 ability is pretty relevant too. There's a lot of 1 CMC or 0 CMC threats on the board. You just minus it to get rid of it, and if they can't get rid of her, she just overall generates value over time. And her healing is also relevant too sometimes. You just removed a creature from the graveyard, heal 2, kind of sometimes relevant. So yeah, I've liked her, and I've decided to keep her in my deck here. Subtlety, another great side deck card, especially against control or against elementals, stuff that are also playing Cavern of Souls. So this is another way to interact with decks that have like Cavern of Souls, that have Veil of Summers. Just another way to deal with it. And on top of it, it's a 3/3 body with flying. Good to add pressure when you're a control deck. It kind of acts as kind of like a mentor, monastery mentor, where you're going to be the one aggroing them. If they can't get rid of this, it's going to be harder for them to deal with your Planeswalker and stuff like that. Well, I guess if you had this and your Planeswalker, you're in a pretty good spot. But I definitely have loved Subtlety. I usually cast him for his full mana value. I usually don't invoke it. Invoking it kind of feels kind of bad. There are times where you will invoke it, but for the most part, I play him as a 4/4, um, or cast him as a 4/4 or with his full mana value. So that's what I have liked. But I know that invoking him is an option. So yeah. And then final card, it's just kind of fill in card right now. Um, I like this card against, I guess, Enchantress decks, which you don't really play too much against, but you do play against a lot of Artifact decks, and Artifact has been a fairly popular um, archetype since the since the release of Modern Horizon 2, and Kamigawa. Kamigawa, there's a lot of like cool artifacts that people are playing, vehicles, stuff like that, and you do see that around a lot. And this card is, well, just a blowout against them, right? So you just cast it for triple white and two colorless. You blow out, you heal a bunch, and that's always a good time. You don't really see too many. I actually haven't really played against any blue Urza decks. Maybe once or twice. I did play against a couple Asmodan decks back then when Asmo was popular, but I think Asmo has more or less kind of fallen off the face of the planet. So yeah, kind of just a generic anti enchantment and artifact hate. If you wanted to, you can just play another board wipe. You can play another dam, maybe, or you can play Supreme Verdict if you wanted to. Kind of saves the same function, but I just want to have interaction with the artifacts and back roll decks a little bit more. The fact it's also an instant, which is nice. Dam and Supreme Verdict is not an instant unless you had Teferi on board that upticked. But otherwise, I'd say Fracturing Gust is a cool, neat card to have in your side deck. And as a one of, it's not too bad. But yeah, so let's go ahead and talk about some popular matchups that you might see and ways to side against them, and what to maybe take out, and what to maybe go ahead and add in. So I'm just looking on MTG Modern decks right now. I'm just looking at the top tier 1 decks, I guess. So first off, you got looks like 4-color Blink decks. So 4-color Blink decks are usually Urian decks, or maybe they're 4-color control. In either case, they kind of fall under the same sort of style of play. Is that they're casting a bunch of those elementals like Solitudes, Fury, and then trying to blink them. Either blink those cards, or they get Omnath out on the board and just make a million or get tons and tons of value out of that, and just overwhelm you with value. The main weakness of that deck is its ability to sort of play on curve. So if they have a really slow hand, or they don't have the right colors to cast their stuff, that's where they kind of stumble a little bit, because it is a very greedy mana base that they have. So if you attack their mana base, it's a great way to kind of slow them down, great way to hinder them. You can play stuff like Spreading Seas, to kind of hit their mana base, or you play hand disruption. In this place, I'm playing Esper, so you could play Thoughtseize if you wanted to kind of disrupt their hand. But yeah, let's go ahead and take a look at what I might add in against them. So, taking a look at my profile here, I probably would add in triple Aether Gust here, maybe Kaya's and Subtlety. So these are the cards I would probably put in against them. So let me explain. So, yeah, Gust is definitely going to be good against Omnath, against Fury, against maybe Endurance even. And the fact that they have probably Caverns of Souls or something like that, good way to kind of interact with that, and get rid of that and spin it back. Looking at the top deck in MTG, looks like they play mostly Fury and 4 Omnath and Solitudes. They got Lightning Bolts, some Ephemerates here. They got some Prismatics. They got Abundant Growth, Sprawls, even Red and 6 even. Yeah, so definitely Aether Gust can hit basically all those cards. So I definitely add that in. Now, Sully probably really good against them too, because they have a lot of creatures. that you want to hit. You hit like a Risen Reef. You can hit Omnath. You can hit basically any of their elementals too, which is nice if they do invoke it, and you can cast this for free for 4 mana. You're basically gonna minus them 2 cards, and you're gonna be up on tempo there if they decided to invoke something, or in turn you can also invoke and if you're up in card advantage and you can afford it, you can also invoke. Reason why I say Kaya is just mainly to use it as removal, because this deck does struggle to remove cards that are higher than 3 CMC, because Prismatic Ending has a difficult time getting to that 4 mana to, like, you don't want to spend 4 mana to get rid of a subtlety or a Omnath, because they already plussed off of it, and it's kind of hard to do that, to spend 4 mana. And the fact that it's also not instant speed, which kind of makes Prismatic Ending kind of crappier, because you have to they have to have a threat, and then you have to have like open mana during your turn to do it, and I just don't like that. So I like playing Kaya. So if they cast a Fury, they cast an Omnath, okay, wait until they're entered and you just remove it, make a token or whatever, and then your turn you're free to either keep mana open again or play a Planeswalker or something like that. So that's why I would probably put it against them. And what I'd probably take out, let's see here, what I'd probably take out for it, they're all like, there's very few cards, probably like the Jace and Cryptic Command. I always seem to side these out, and I don't even know why I even play them in the main deck, but I still enjoy their presence in the deck. Maybe Prismatics, maybe reduce the Snapcasters, maybe even reduce Counterspell, honestly, because you know that they're gonna be having they have 3 Caverns of Souls, and they have Veils in the deck, and they also probably have like Aether Gust, or not Aether Gust, Mystic Disputes and stuff. So Counterspell might not be as good. Maybe even the Worldly, just because the only targets you can probably hit with Worldly would maybe be the Risen Reef, because everything else gets a little too expensive to effectively use Worldly. But yeah, I'd probably take that out. What is that, like 5 cards there? You can maybe even take out an Opt if you're playing too slow. Damn is debatable. Sometimes I like Damn, sometimes I don't. But if they go out of control, I guess you can definitely keep the Damn in there and just use it, just overload it to get rid of their board. And yeah, maybe a Snapcaster is what I would probably take out. So actually, I think that's already enough here. So that's about 7 cards or so. So I would probably like do this just so like there's cards I probably don't want to double up on as much. Like I don't want to have 4 copies of Prismatic. It may not, like, Counterspell is the only card I debate on. But yeah, I still keep in Prismatic, namely just to play against Teferi, because if they have Teferi on board, it's gonna suck, So these two are technically to counter Teferis. March is not gonna do too much good in this matchup, so I would probably take out the March. Maybe you can take out another Opt, perhaps, or a Snapcaster, depending on how you feel. But that's what I would probably take out. I would keep in the 4 Teferis to play, so that you can stop Veils. You can stop them from because they're probably gonna play Endurance. Most likely, they're gonna probably play like 4 Endurance against you, or not Endurance. They might put Endurance in if they see Snapcasters. They'll put in Endurance, but most likely they're gonna be playing Subtlety. They're gonna up the Subtlety to like 2 or 3, and the Fairy's pretty good against that. But yeah, so that's what I would probably do against a 80 card Omnath deck, 4-color control. And then let's see here, what else do we got? Mill is not a very popular deck archetype, but it is one of our biggest weakness, And I don't really have a side card against Mill per se. Um, in my experiences when I'm playing against Mill, I kind of just honestly just YOLO it and pray that you get enough counter spells, enough interaction to remove the crabs and stuff like that. Um, Against a really good Mill player or a Mill player that like top decked really well, not much you can really do. You kind of just have to maybe live with it. I would maybe add in 6 cards into your deck, just to start off at 66 cards, and that sometimes help, because you gotta think in terms of your deck as your health. Um, so I wouldn't add in more than that. If you're like some people I know, they'll shove in all 15 cards of their side deck into their main deck, and I think that's a bad idea because then now you're gonna make your deck a lot worse, and you're also gonna maybe not be drawing the cards you need. But what I would probably add in against Mill would probably be just like um, 6 cards or so. Probably something like this, I would say. Yeah, something like this. Um, just to have threats and just to have access to the stuff. Um, so the mirror Mill, I would probably just shove these 6 in. Maybe even just take out um, your ops. Maybe I guess you can take out ops in case you don't want to be drawing too many cards. That is what I would probably maybe take out is the 4 ops and add in this 4 or 5 cards. Maybe add in like something like that. So if you take out 4 cards, you're gonna be adding in probably about 10 cards or so, something like that. So what is this right here? This is 9. So you can probably take out 3 ops then. Just put in like 9 cards. So you have a total of 66 cards there, and then just kind of hopefully still be able to play the game, get milled obviously a little bit, but still have some stuff in your graveyard so you can still Snapcaster for value. Um, and these cards aren't terrible because Mill's gonna have a hard time removing Sanctifier. Um, and sometimes you want to get rid of your graveyard if you think they have like Drown in a Lock or something like that. Um, I guess you can also play Rest in Peace if you wanted to. If you want to hit your own graveyard and make sure that their Drown in a Lock is dead, you can also do that. Um, if you wanted to, you can play an Emrakul in the deck, in the side deck. I find that they mostly have an answer to Emrakul. They'll always have like a surgical or something like that. So where Emrakul hits the graveyard, they're probably just gonna surgical it. So you're not gonna really be able to survive off of her alone against Mill. But yeah, our Mill decks are I think is my worst matchup compared to even Burn or something like that. So just be careful if you do play against Mill. Just know what they're gonna do, and probably I would advise you to practice a little bit against Mill, just to kind of know what cards are a threat and what cards to kind of stop. Yeah. Um, Next off, let's talk about another popular deck. Probably Is It Murktide. So Is It Murktide? I'd probably do something like this. And maybe yeah, this is a lot of commitment for sure, but I think sometimes it is worth it. Um, I almost do almost 10 cards here, I think. So Is It Murktide is a very strong deck, and um, this is what I'd probably add in. Probably take out like these for sure. Maybe this. Probably take out all my snaps actually. Snaps are a little expensive in this matchup, so I think and on top of that, I'm also playing the Rest in Peace tier. So I think this is what I would do here. What is this? 5. Almost 10 cards there. So debating, you could still keep all this and maybe take out the 2 dams or the 2 additional ops maybe. So you gotta take out 2 dams or 2 additional ops. Because the reason I would just take out the ops because you're gonna risk if you're going like second if you do win the first match. I find that for the most part I'm okay winning the first match against Murktide, but if they go first the second game, um, you're gonna be playing from behind, and I think you probably don't want to be casting opts. But yeah, I think something like this is what I would take out. Dam is a maybe because um, Dam is nice against Murktide, but you also have the Kai's Guile to kind of deal with Murktides. But if you think you are struggling against Murktide that's on the board, then maybe take out Prismatic or something like that. But Prismatic and World is good against dealing with Ragavan and Darcy, so I have a hard time also taking those out. But there's a times where I drew so many Prismatic that I was kind of getting screwed there. You maybe take out a counter spell maybe. I definitely keep in 4 Teferis. Teferi is really good against Murktide decks because then they can't counter your stuff. If they can't remove Teferi, you basically win the game. Um, but yeah, I suspect this is always gonna be good. You want to save this against um, Expressive Alliteration and Blood Moon. That's why you want to put in the Aether Gust. And I suspect that what they would side against you is going to be Disputes and Spell Pierce. So when you see your opponent have 1 mana open, just expect to see one of those cards, and so you're gonna have to kind of play around it. But yeah, so Aether Gust I definitely like. Subtlety is a maybe, but I still like it because if they cast Murktide, you go Subtlety, and they probably won't be able to cast it again. So yeah, that's why I like that. Kaya and Rest in Peace, pretty self-explanatory. This one's a maybe, but I still like to put her in because she can still hit like their graveyard. She can still hit their Ragavans and Darcys. So yeah, I still like her. But she is a little weak to the Bolt and Unholy Heat, so just be careful of that. But if you have Rest in Peace outs, Unholy Heat won't be as good. Me just picking 2 for 2 damage. They're unlikely going to be able to get rid of Kaya. If she can stick on the board, you could use her to kind of win. But yeah, so that's what I would put in for Is It Murktide? Another is Teamer Cascade. Yeah, Teamer Cascade. I probably do this and maybe those Veto. So I would probably do something like this, right? So the Veto, Sully, and Aether Gust. What you're probably gonna take out is you'll probably toss out all of your Prismatic Ending, honestly. Because what permanent are they playing that's like, besides Rhinos that are gonna be really, you're gonna be really hitting with it. And maybe even though Marches, like the only things you might hit with Prismatic and Marches is you might be hitting a Skull Crusher Giant, or maybe the Brazen Borrower. But other than that, yeah, you aren't going to be really hitting anything with that. So I'll probably just take that out, honestly. So like six of these cards out, and yeah, side those 6 in. 6 or was it 7? Probably take out one more card, maybe an opt or something like that. You could just toss that out. But yeah, so Aether Gust, this is definitely going to be used against Charlotte agents, or if they cast a Wooded Foothill, you could slap this down if you had to. But I would definitely hit the shard list just to remove it. So I think that's how it works, right? So it's on cast, but if you remove this, yeah, if you remove the shard list agent, it doesn't get its cascade ability on the cast because it gets removed from the stack. Same thing with Sully. Same idea here is you want to hit the shard list agents when you try to cast it, and if they cast it on your turn or something, if they do like a Violent Outburst or something like that, then this is what you want to use. So that way they can't force a negation you if they try to Violent Outburst or something on your turn, or if they somehow shard agent on your turn and they cast a Wooded Foothill, then you want to just hit the Wooded Foothill with the Veto, so that way they don't get the Rhinos. But yeah, so that's what I would probably do against them. Everything else, it's a 50-50 matchup, I'd say. I don't really get too much practice against them. When I was playing my Grixis deck, I was playing against a lot more Cascade decks, but as of late in my meta, they've all but kind of disappeared, so I haven't really seen them around. So I haven't really gotten too much practice against them. But yeah, that's a pretty simple sideboard there. Not much to really say there. Just be careful of one or few of their cards. Brazen Borrower is gonna be kind of annoying because they bounce your Teferis, they bounce your stuff like that. Kind of annoying there, but shouldn't be too hard to deal with. Looks like the next one is Amulet Titan. So against Amulet Titan, um, yeah, there's actually a lot of things you gotta watch out when playing against Amulet Titan. Uh, Maybe this. So Amulet Titan's a little bit of a toss up, but I think our main board, for the most part, can deal with Amulet Titan. But once again, these five were kind of like staples against a lot of those green decks, and then this is optional here. You've got the space, and Kaya optional. Kaya, it's namely here to hit um, the amulet the amulet itself, but it's not super important because you have a bunch of worldly lights and you have prismatic endings already, so you probably don't actually need her. She might just be a dead card, but um, Kaya, for when they do get the Titan out, if they only have so many Titans, right? So if they get the Titan out, okay, they'll get 2 lands, but if you can kill the Titan, then you're good, and it doesn't target, so they can't Veil Summers the Kaya's Guile, which is nice. So if they go Titan and they try to veil you, none of these cards are affected by Veil, which is nice. Um, so that's one way to kind of get rid of Titan without if Titan's being cast with Veil as backup or as Cavern of Soul as backup, then these cards will save your life. Because I run into that experience a lot, where they usually they will cast Titan not by itself. They will usually always have a pack of negation. They'll have a Veil of Summers, or they cast it with Caverns of Souls. So those are the 3 cards you gotta watch out for, especially as control decks. What I would probably take out, honestly, is there's not much to remove. I mean, if your counter spells are too expensive, you can probably take this out. Um, Solitudes are good against them. Teferis are still really good because you want to stop Pack of Negation and Veils, and so they don't really have any way of dealing with a Teferi that's on the board anyways. You also gotta be careful of Urza, the land. So um, definitely they're gonna be, if they, that's their other backup play, is to use Urza to kill you, the Urza Sagas. Um, Valakut combo with the Valakut combo with what's his face, the Dryad. That's rarely come up because I usually get rid of Dryad anyways, so I'm not too afraid of the Valakut combo with Dryad. I'm more afraid of a Titan that's coming down like turn 3 or something like that, and that's gonna combo you and kill you. That's more likely to happen. Or if they can't resolve Titan, they're just gonna play a bunch of Urza Sagas and make a bunch of constructs. Search Amulet Titan, or search like a search Amulet with the Saga, or they search like Pithing Needle or something like that. That's their other game plan that you gotta be worried about, is the damn Sagas, because they just keep making freaking a bunch of construct tokens. You have to get rid of those eventually. So yeah, definitely Prismatic and Marches will handle that for the most part. I may take out some Snapcasters because they are playing. They have on search Urborg, or sorry, not Urborg. What the hell is that land that banishes everything? Bajuka Bob, sorry. So yeah, they have Bajuka Bobs and they have Endurances. So Snapcasters might not be too good. So you could potentially take them out. I keep in the dams and stuff just to get rid of Titan and to get rid of their constructs. So I would definitely keep that in. If you get rid of this, then you could probably take out 1 or 2 ops. And this is what I'd probably take out. What is this? 7 cards for 7? Yeah, that's what I'd probably take out. Cryptic Command is not too bad, honestly. Cryptic Command, if they get out like a Titan or they have a bunch of construct, you can use it to tap all their stuff and or maybe bounce something. But yeah, so Cryptic Command is not that bad, but it's a little expensive. Maybe you can take out the Jace if you wanted to, but Jace, I resolved Jace against Amulet Titan, and they have a very shit time removing your Planeswalker. You can just use your Planeswalkers to win the game from there. Maybe Counterspell. if you think they got a lot of veils or they got a lot of caverns, then the counterspell is not that great. Counterspell is great to counter a couple of cards. It's to counter like the amulet if they hardcast amulet, or if they hardcast if they play Summoner's Pack, you can counterspell that. But you're unlikely to be able to counter any of their monsters with counterspell, so it's a little bit of a weaker card against this matchup. So I'd maybe remove that. But yeah, so that's what I would do. What else? Living End, pretty simple game plan too. I'd probably do something like this. Sully's pretty good, and yeah, something like this. So I'm gonna cut. The video's getting a little long, so I'm gonna try to speed it up a little bit. But yeah, so Kaya, Graveyard Hate, maybe not Sanctifier, depending on which build of Living End they're going. If they're playing the one that plays a lot of blue creature, then you probably don't want to put in this at all, because this would only probably like Sanctifier would only hit Architect maybe, and maybe Street Wraith. So she's not that great. I definitely probably play this on top of maybe the vetoes here. So vetoes, you're gonna want to veto Living End for sure. They play main deck for Force of Negation, so you gotta get rid of that. You gotta get rid of the Living End, or you get rid of the yeah, basically that's what you're hitting. Living End, maybe Violent Outburst, but yeah, other than that, that's what you want to hit. Kaya's Guile for sure, just to stack on the Graveyard Hate, more Graveyard Hate, more Graveyard Hate. This is to mainly hit the Shardless agents. So if they cast Shard agents, you can subtlety, and they will not be able to Force Negation you, which is good. So yeah, beware of that. Other than that, I'd probably get rid of all this right here. Take all the prismatic and all the worldly, because you're not gonna be hitting anything on their board. They don't have anything small for you to hit. So I would take out all of this right here for sure. Get rid of all of that. And in terms of like your other cards, maybe some Snapcasters, you can downsize Snapcasters. You're playing a lot of hate, Graveyard Hate, so you might not be able to use that many. So maybe like 2 each, or something like that. But yeah, I definitely would get rid of all your prismatic and all your small stuff, because you're not playing anything small. So that's it for Living End. Burn, I guess mono burn, we can talk about that. Burn is fairly easy for me too. Fairly easy side, I would say. Probably something like this. You can maybe, if you're really aggressive, you can maybe do also a regular Kaya. So this as blockers, and this to get rid of like any of their graveyard stuff like Lava Dart or something like that. You can use Sanctifier. Sanctifier is great as a blocker, and they don't really have a way to remove Sanctifier unless they're playing like Path of Exile, or they're playing Prismatic Endings or something like that. They're unlikely to side that against you, but I've seen that happen. I've seen Prismatic Endings sided and stuff like that, so just be aware. This is great against their burn spells, I guess. It kind of delays them, stuff like that, or if they have like a rolling vortex or whatever you call it. You can use this to spin that. I mean, their entire basically it's a removal and counter spell against their entire deck, so I don't see why not. And then Kaya's just great. You heal 4, you make a blocker, or you sacrifice them. So Kaya's great. I would probably remove a lot of your expensive spells. So probably like Jace you remove. You remove Cryptic Command. Damn is not that great. Maybe if they have a lot of, definitely you want to get rid of this. I think I spoke about it in my other video, but you want to get rid of all your ops, every single one. So because they play Eidolon, and if they have Eidolon on the board and you have op, you are gonna ping yourself for 2 each time you play op. So don't do it. Get rid of opt for sure. You maybe want to get rid of maybe one Teferi here, because that that is kind of expensive. You get rid of the cryptic command for sure. So what is that? That leaves you like 7 cards here, right? And we were putting in maybe about 8 cards, or maybe take out a Snapcaster or something like that. But yeah, that's pretty much for burn. I have it's a toss up depending on if it can stabilize. If they can stabilize, then you're gonna be in trouble. If they run away with the game, then yeah. So just be careful with that. But pretty easy. Let's see what else. Mono Green Tron. Tron is pretty similar. Um, Against Tron, you probably want to do like, I don't know. Against Tron, it's hard to say. You probably want to do something like Dovin's Veto, maybe Aether Gust. Like I haven't really got too much practice against Tron lately. They kind of disappeared from the face of the planet. I'm more worried about Titan than I am against Tron. But your removal suite like Kaya's Guile is great. Vetoes and stuff like that to stop their Planeswalker, to stop um, Karn, and to stop Ugin, because that's their main win con, is the 4 or 10 Planeswalkers. They play 2 Ugins, 4 Liberator, 4 Creator Karns. So get rid of that. Some creatures they might play, maybe they'll play Ulamog and Warm Coil. Warm Coil for this deck is not too bad to deal with. You should be able to deal with Warm Coil fairly easy with Kaya's Guile to act as removal, or just to bounce it with the fairy, stuff like that. Some shenanigans like that. You can probably deal with Warm Coil. So Warm Coil's never given me too much issue. It'd probably be Ulamog. Ulamog is definitely harder to remove, and you definitely want to probably max out on your subtlety to get rid of the Ulamog. If they cast Ulamog, you go subtlety, and they're gonna have to spend another turn trying to cast Ulamog. Hopefully, you should be able to establish a control and just run away with it. You can still keep in like the prismatic endings and stuff like that to get rid of like Chromatic Star, to get rid of their Expo map maybe. So they still have a bunch of 1/1s that you can hit with both the March and the prismatic ending. But you know, it's a toss up. If you think those are important to hit, then go ahead and hit them. Otherwise, I'd maybe remove the prismatic and marches, because they're not going to be able to deal with anything else on the board. You're only going to be hitting their small weenie artifacts. So it's a maybe. I mean, I guess in that sense, if you think that, you could also play Fracturing Aether Gust, or Fracturing Gust, to kind of get rid of all the Warm Coils, to get rid of all of their artifacts, get rid of ballistas and stuff like that. But yeah, Tron, you're not gonna really see too much, so I don't think you really have to worry about Tron. Any other matchups that I think you might play against? Other control decks. I forgot to talk about that. So other blue-white control, stuff like that. In general, I don't really have too much to side against them. I think I only side a couple cards actually. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Sorry, I was counting my side deck here. So I'll probably do something like this. Honestly, that's all you really need. This my particular deck, I have a very good time against most other control decks, like against other Bant control, against other blue-white control, Jeskai control. I play against all of them, against my locals, and I've done well against all of them, namely because this deck is the deck's got like Snapcasters. Not a lot of people are playing Snapcasters. So Snapcaster in general is good against other control decks, because you get the value and you get a body on board, and you can kind of threaten them. And so for the most part, we're pretty good there. We're also playing 4 Teferis. Most control decks are playing maybe 2 to 3 baby Teferis, but we're playing max 4, so that's pretty good already. What I'd probably get rid of is, I'll probably get rid of the dams for sure. And maybe the marches won't be as good, because they don't really have any small enchantments or artifacts for you to remove, and they don't really have any small creatures for you to remove. So, and obviously you have the only thing you might have to worry about is they have a bunch of solitudes, because I've run into decks that have, obviously they play 4 solitudes, so that's something you'll probably have to watch out for, and for subtleties. So those are the cards I suspect that are going to side against you. Maybe disputes um, might give you some issues there, but overall I think the matchup hasn't been it's been pretty good for me. I don't think I've really lost against any other control decks. I lost to my friend's control deck, my friend's mono blue control deck, just because he's more of a combo. He has like Narset um, and stuff like that, which is a little more difficult to play with. But even then, it's still like a 50-50 toss up, um, not a one sided thing. So yeah, um, I guess Yawgmoth is another deck that you might play against. For Yawgmoth, this deck has been pretty good against Yawgmoth. Like honestly, they can't really. They're a combo deck, but our deck plays so much interaction that they have very difficult and a lot of graveyard hate. So I'd probably play something like this, maybe even this, and maybe that. Like, or well, this is my main deck anyway, so I don't know why that's in here. So, um, yeah, I mean persists and combo and stuff like that. We have a lot of removal. We have marches. We have prismatic endings that gets rid of all their young wolves and stuff like that. They have a real shit time against us. I don't think you really have to worry about Yawgmoth. You don't really have any creatures on the board, so they're not really able to get the full value out of Yawgmoth, because Yawgmoth is so good because it hits other creatures, puts -1/1 counters on them, kills them off. You can still draw off Yawgmoth without putting the 1/1 counters on, but in general, we only have, they might be able to get rid of like a Snapcaster or something like that, but you almost never let Yawgmoth resolve anyways. They might try to Veil of Summers you maybe, um, um, but you have you still got Aether Gust and stuff like that, and you have Marches, you have um, Prismatic Ending, which Veil doesn't protect against. So I'd say this deck is fairly good against Yawgmoth combo. I haven't had an issue dealing with that. Grixis, former Grixis Lurist, or any form of Rakdos or Grixis, Death Shadow. That's the other probably super popular deck you're gonna play against. For that, that matchup is it's weird. I've won most of my matchups against them, but there are sometimes they do blow you out if they get their a real good setup. But I'd probably do something like this. Let me see. Probably something like this. Just more graveyard hate. The graveyard hate is not as useful anymore because they don't have Lurus anymore, and so they don't really care. But hitting their delirium still hurts them. So if you get rid of Darcy's delirium, you get rid of Unholy Heats. That's still pretty good. They have a really hard time removing Sanctifier. Kaya's Guile is still pretty good. This to get rid of like Death Shadow, stuff like that. You could do Aether Gust, but Aether Gust namely would hit Darcy, Monkey, hits their Expressive Alliteration, but that's about it. They don't really have that many red cards that are super duper worthwhile. They're not gonna be playing Blood Moon, so you don't really have to worry about that. What I would take out is I'll take out the Jace probably, maybe 1 or 2 of the Snapcasters. I keep in all the low level removal. That's really good against them. And yeah, that's probably it. Like probably some ops, some Snapcasters, and probably Jace and Cryptic Command. They're too expensive to play against them, so I'll get rid of those and add these in, and you should be able to deal with their stuff. Thoughtseize is gonna suck to play against, but that's just the nature of the deck. So yeah. And probably the last deck I'm probably gonna talk about is probably Hammer Time, or artifact decks in general. So you have Hammer Time. You got blue artificer sort of decks. Not much. I don't think this deck has a terrible time against them. If you draw really slow, then they'll probably kill you really quickly. But if they don't, then most of the time I can kind of just board wipe them and just keep them at bay a lot of the times. Um, but yeah, I probably play something like this. There's not too much you really have to side against them. Um, so Kai's Guy Ultimate just make token blockers with flying, so you can block like um, flying dudes, the Ink Moth. They also have a lot of cards that provide indestructible or non-targeting, like Mother of Runes or one of the runes chicks, stuff like that. And Kai's Guile can kind of act as good removal against them. Fracturing Gust definitely, just blows the entire board up. Kaya's just to remove the small omnicopters and stuff like that. Removes hammer. Um, and other than that, I mean, yeah, prismatic endings. I definitely keep in dam for sure. The regeneration on dam is actually pretty important against them. So there's many times where they have that card where it allows them to regenerate an artifact. This card just kind of hoses them of that, so which is good. Um, Teferi's okay. Maybe not Jace. Jace might be too slow against them. Uh, Maybe counterspells. Counterspells sometimes feels kind of bad against them. But like you want to counterspell Sigarda's aid for sure. Maybe if they flash in the hammer, you want to counterspell that. But like it's like a lot of like one mana stuff that you just don't care to counterspell. Like you just don't want to counter it. But yeah, there are a few cards you will want to counter. So maybe keeping the counterspells. Um, and yeah, that's all I can really say. Is that the matchup is a 50-50. They get really good opening, they'll blow you out. But most of the time, if you can stabilize, they'll run out of steam, especially without lures anymore. They're gonna run out of steam a lot quicker. I never really had any issues dealing with affinity decks. So affinity hammer time, they're not hammer time probably more difficult because it's harder to navigate when they might have a kill on you. Where affinity, they just kind of splash their board with a bunch of stuff. You generally have enough time to kind of respond to that and kind of stop them from getting a lot of stuff on the board. Yeah, you do have to be careful of the mind reader, the mind sensor guy that draws them two cards. So that's how they keep up. They keep themselves in the game. Is they play that and they just draw two cards each time. So just be careful of that. Outside of that, the rest of the deck is relatively easy to handle. But yeah, so there you go. I think for the most part, I think I covered most of the matchups that you've played. Let me know if there's anything else I should cover. But that should give you a general idea of, what to put in and what to take out, and what to watch out for. Counter siding in this deck is not that important because, the card that hurts you the most is going to be probably Veil, maybe like a Thoughtseize or something like that. Maybe sometimes Chalice. I for the most part, I don't care for Chalice because you can always get rid of it if you need to. Most people, when they play against me, if they do run Chalice, they'll Chalice on one or something like that. But it's like, it's not the end of the world. I don't really care. Um, the hardest card to probably play against is probably going to be Mystic Dispute and Spell Pierce. Those are the two cards I will always kind of run into sometimes. And, obviously, there's nothing to counter side against that. You either have an answer to it or you let it resolve and get countered. But yeah, counter siding is not super important. Your deck is not really weak to against anything in particular. You're really good against combo decks. Combo decks like Oops All Spells, other like Lotus combos. You have so much interaction. You have so many counter spells and stuff. You should be good against them. I guess Living End is technically a combo deck. Same thing with Teamer. But for the most part, because we have so much interaction available to us, you should be good on that. Outside of that, I think that's really it. Most of our side deck cards are meant to kind of just hinder our opponent's strategy because we are a already control deck. So for the most part, we're not really actively putting out threats on the board. We're not really doing anything else. We're kind of sitting back with our mana open and kind of playing reactive. So there's not much they can side against us that would hurt us as much. I had people side Rest in Peace and stuff against me, but it's like, okay, Snapcaster is part of my deck, but I mean, I don't. He's just kind of like a win more card, kind of a threat and a value card. But they do that. If they side stuff like that against me, I don't care. But yeah, I think it's just being able to play the deck well and not lose out on tempo, and making sure you can control the board is probably going to be the most uh, important thing about piloting this deck, or just any control decks in general. Making sure you have enough time to complete your games, or if you think you're gonna head into time, make sure you're ahead a game or two or something like that. Um, and yeah, I think time management is probably going to be more difficult because all your matches are going to be kind of grindy. That's just the nature of playing control. So just you know, be aware of that. Be aware of how much time you have. Be aware of your opponent's resources in their hand or in their graveyard and what you have. Um, the worst thing for this deck is getting land stuck, because control needs all that mana open in order to play effectively. If you're counting one of their spells and they're playing 2 or 3 spells at a time, you're gonna lose. So you want to be able to have your mana open, have the right colors to cast your stuff for sure. Um, yes, I'm playing very low lands. I'm playing 24 lands, but I am playing a lot of draw cards, and in my head, I think that kind of counterbalances out. But if you feel like you're getting land stuck, then I would probably add 1 or 2 more lands to the deck, and maybe even more draw cards. I know Opt is like a subpar draw card, but I like the Opt, so I like the art for it. You can play Consider, Serum's Vision, something else, which is fine. You probably want to play some sort of instant speed. So if you're playing Snapcasters, playing instant speed draw card is very important. So I think that's it. I hope you guys enjoy, and see you guys next time. If you've got any questions, comments, suggestions, even just let me know down in the comments. I'm always on YouTube. I'm always watching stuff, so I always get notifications, and I'll reply back to you guys. But I think that's it. You guys have a good one. See you next time.